All right, we are 2 minutes after the hour on Thursday, April 25th. If you are on today's webinar, welcome. You are tuning into the importance of openness in generative AI. We have an engaging webinar with an excellent panel. Our Generative AI Commons Chair, Annie, will be hosting today's discussion and giving a short presentation to kick things off today. If you have questions throughout today's talk, please place your questions in the chat and we will answer them at the end of today's discussion. And with that, I will turn it over to Annie. Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on the importance of openness in building generative AI. We're thrilled to have you join us for this insightful discussion on the topic that's not only timely, but also pivotal in shaping the future of AI. Generative AI, with its ability to create content ranging from text to images to music, holds immense promise to revolutionizing the various industries from creative arts to healthcare and beyond. At the heart of this discussion lies the concept of openness. In the realm of AI development, openness refers to sharing of knowledge, data, resources within the research community. It is about fostering the collaboration, transparency, inclusivity to advance the field collectively. Today, we will dive into why openness is not just a desirable trait, but an essential one for unlocking the full potential of generative AI. My name is Anni Lai, and I will be your host today. I have invited esteemed panelists from the Generative AI Commons community to share their insights and expertise on this crucial topic. But before we delve into this discussion, I would like to take a few minutes to introduce Generative AI Commons. Generative AI Commons was launched last December. Just in a few months, we have achieved quite a bit of momentum. We have over 120 active members from over 60 active organizations. The Generative AI Commons is a community-driven open membership initiative with elected chairs and represented by nonprofit, academic, and industry in a neutral form. We are here to collectively innovate in the area of generative AI. We're shaping the future of generative AI through community-driven open source and open science. We embrace responsible and trustworthy AI, foster collaboration, promote AI literacy, and advocate for our community. This is our mission statement. We are here to foster the democratization, advancement, and adoption of the efficient, secure, reliable, ethical governance, open source innovation through neutral governance, open and transparent in building generative AI. This is how we are organized. Currently, we have 5 work streams. And as you can see, model and data work stream focuses on models, weights, ethical data sets, benchmarks, reports, training, and inference code, and other projects in the area of models and data. We have frameworks work stream focusing on generative AI adoption, reference architecture, model openness framework. Later, you'll hear about. It's our first, most high-value deliverable that came out of this community. There has been a lot of excitement about that. And also, we will cover best practice guidelines, compliance, and code. In the application workstream, we focus on AI application frameworks, databases, agent frameworks, interface, metadata standards, or any other projects in the application AI space. And outreach and education workstream, this is doing this webinar that's coming out of the education and outreach workstream. We focus on education, training, thought leadership, outreach, legislative representatives, state of open source. And in addition to this webinar, we actually are in the process of producing educational material, and we just published generative AI glossary, and we have a lot more high-value deliverables that will come out of this work stream. Last but not least, responsible AI. The reason we are here, we are collaborating in an open fashion in building generative AI is hoping that this open collaboration will reach responsible AI. And in this work stream, we cover security, privacy, safety, policy, copyright, model and data lineage issues. And this team is currently working on building a responsible AI framework. As you can see, there's a lot of exciting activities going on, and we can never have too many participants. And please join us. We could use all kinds of talents from all areas. And if you are brand new to AI, that's okay too. And we could also, you can come and join our work streams and learn from other people, and eventually you can become one of the contributors. We are part of LF AI and Data. As you can see, LF AI and Data has been around. It has gotten a lot of momentum, it's a very solid brand. It's gotten support from top leading IT companies and in the cloud space as well as in the AI space. Okay, so that's a brief introduction of Generative AI Commons, and I'm going to kick off our panel discussion today. And today I have invited three major contributors from Generative AI Commons, and Brian Behlendorf, who is the Chief AI Strategist from Linux Foundation, Irving, and he's a research affiliate with MIT, Ofer Hermoni, who is an AI strategy consultant, and he's also chairing the education and outreach work stream. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Annie.
Awesome. And so, okay, so first, well, I briefly introduce yourself, but I would like to hear, please introduce yourself and give us more background about your background in tech in general and as well as in AI space. Who would like to start? Brian, how about you?
Very well. Thanks, Annie, and thank you, everyone. I'm Brian Behlendorf, as Annie mentioned, Chief AI Strategist for the Linux Foundation. I also assist as CTO for another Linux Foundation project called the Open Wallet Foundation. There's some interesting harmony there. And I've been with the Linux Foundation for 8 years, focusing on security, on blockchain, on a lot of different topics, and in the open source industry since before it was called open source. It's really generous to call me a major contributor to the Generative AI Commons. I'm a big fan. I really believe in what both that and the Linux Foundation AI and Data project is doing as a whole. And there's quite a few AI efforts across the Linux Foundation that we're really trying hard to weave together to make sure they are working together on important projects. In fact, every Linux Foundation project these days has an AI angle or an AI subcommittee or an AI project of one form or another. So I'm really trying hard to weave those together, as well as think about what else is happening on the open source AI landscape that we could be helping with and bringing into the Linux Foundation.
Awesome. Thank you.
My name is Irving Wladawsky-Berger, and I worked at IBM for many years, from starting in the research labs and then as part of different kinds of organizations. And in particular, which I'll mention later, I was very involved in organizing IBM's Linux initiative in the 1990s. Before that, I had organized IBM's internet strategy. And so when doing the Linux initiative, obviously, that's when I got involved with the whole world of open source. And in fact, IBM was one of the companies that helped to launch the Open Software Development Lab, which was the precursor of the Linux Foundation. I'm also a member of the Linux Foundation Research Advisory Board. So I've had a lot of relationships with the open source world.
Awesome. Ofer?
Hi, nice to meet everyone. My name is Ofer Hermoni. I have been a startup founder twice already, and the co-founder of the Linux Foundation AI. So I've been here in this forum since the inception of this foundation. And as Annie mentioned, I'm now chairing the Education and Outreach Committee, which is delivering this webinar. And I am taking part of this because I believe that this technology is probably the most important technology in the history, and will have the most impact on us. So I think it's important to be part of it and make sure that we are doing it responsibly. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, so I'm going to just launch into this panel discussion. Okay, question number one. So we're here talking about openness. What does openness mean in the context of AI development, and why is it so crucial? Who would like to start? Brian?
Sure, I'll jump in. So we know why open source is important to software, right? To the open source ecosystem, which has become the driver of 70 to 90% of the software code inside of every physical object that has software, and behind every website, inside every app. The open source has really become the dark matter of that world. And the reason is because it's so much easier for the things that aren't really differentiating when you're in a business or when you're building something that isn't unique. It's so much easier to collaborate with others and build upon the work of others than to try to build everything yourself, right? And some of the unique advantages from open source come from the ability, compared to using a proprietary product, come from being able to scrutinize the source code. If you think there's a bug, being able to dive in and see where the bug exists, how to work around it, perhaps even how to fix it. Having a community of other people who are also working on the code that you can send that fix to, or even send a question to, and engage with, and perhaps you can become a contributor to that project as well. And also, finally, the right to fork, which is the ability to say, hey, this code came from somewhere, but that somewhere seems to not have much viability anymore, but it's interesting code. I'm going to build upon this and take it in a new direction, right? So how does this apply to AI, and why is this important in AI? Well, a lot of the questions about whether it's underlying ethics, whether it's hallucinations, whether it's, how is this built, but also how do we get it to be faster, cheaper to build these big models, cheaper to do inference? How do we get, just more and more data underneath them and make sure we're training it with the data that we want to be training it with? The more visibility we have, the more flexibility we have to work with that code and work with the underlying data, which is so much a part of the driver of the value of these AI models, the better, right? To the degree where, just as with open source software, you want to know that you have this and almost every other piece underneath it as open source code, so that you can fix those bugs and you hit it. There's this reassurance that comes from knowing there's a license on that code that has been vetted and is standardized as a license, right? As an open source approved, OSI approved open source license. Likewise, you kind of really want to crisply understand, what are your abilities with this AI model, right? What can you do with it? How might you change how it behaves? How might you improve it? How might you take it in new directions? And that's where understanding to what degree these models are open, what parts of it are open, are so important, and why there's still tremendous value in the entire stack being open. The reality, of course, is that one big difference here is that the underlying data for many of these models so often has personally identifiable information in it, making it hard to really share in the raw form as you do with source code, as well as perhaps some issues around the copyright terms of that underlying data that make it hard to release the raw data under an open source or otherwise open license. So we have to have some nuance here, and I actually liken it to the nuance that we've long had with building open source systems on top of proprietary hardware, like a chip, right? On top of other proprietary operating systems. There's lots of open source code that runs on Windows, for example. And the opposite, Windows actually now ships with a full copy of Linux inside. So we really need to understand these nuances in a different way than we've understood them traditionally for software. But it is just as important as always.
Awesome. How about Irving? You come from you have been around for a long time, right? You've gone through internet, cloud, and now AI, all these revolutionaries. What lesson can we learn? I mean, can you draw any kind of parallels between the previous revolutions and what we're going through right now, and why openness is so important?
As you and the audience can tell, I've been around for a long time, and in particular, in the 1980s, computing was advancing quite a bit, but all the various companies were proprietary. And what that meant is that if you wanted to send an email from a system, let's say using IBM products, to a system using HP products or Sun Microsystem products, it was very difficult because the networks were proprietary, the software was proprietary, let alone if you wanted to exchange information among them. It was really difficult, and it made very difficult to make progress in the world of IT. Then came the internet, and everything changed. It was really almost magical. And the reason everything changed is because the research communities that developed the internet developed open standards, made open source implementations of these standards available to everybody. So all of a sudden, we were all using the same network with the same protocols, and it was infinitely easier to now communicate with each other. Same thing happened with the World Wide Web, that there were open standards for the web, HTML, HTTP, etc., for websites, for browsers, and the rest is history. We saw what happened. Let me give another example. In the 1980s, Unix was becoming an increasingly important operating system for supercomputing, for technical workstations, for the emerging internet applications, but every vendor had their own proprietary version of Unix. IBM's was called AIX, Sun Microsystems was called Solaris, HP had HPUX, and they were all different. That meant that trying to port an application written on AIX to Sun Solaris was very difficult. Then what happens? Linux showed up in the 90s. And all of a sudden, Linux, because it was open source, pretty much became the version of Unix that everybody used. And I think that what open source gave the IT industry was the ability for companies to now collaborate with each other and grow in a way that was impossible before. We want the same thing to happen, the same degree of collaboration with AI, and that's why OpenAI is so important.
Great. So we know openness is very important, especially in, AI needs to be done in an open source kind of a collaborative kind of environment or community. And obviously it gives transparency and accountability. And Ofer, you are one of the major contributors in the responsible AI workstream. Can you talk to us about what you guys are doing over there and how, open source openness in building AI can provide more transparency and accountability towards a responsible AI?
Yeah, sure. So actually, the responsible AI activities, this is not a new thing, although it recently became much more popular. But we started the responsible AI, or we call it trusted AI committee many years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. And basically, it was pretty hard to get the people to join us and to contribute, but recently, there is a lot of energy in responsible AI. We run many different activities there to ensure responsible, trusted, accountable development of AI, and specifically generative AI. And I think that we will discuss it a little bit later. What is openness? What open source AI mean? Or what are the different levels or classes of open source? But I personally believe that open source allows accountability because you share your data, you share your processes, and everyone can take a look, everyone can check that and identify potential problems or potential problems with the technology. Irving, you're very passionate about this one, right?
Well, the opposite of open is opaque. And well, and this is very important to keep in mind, that AI is fundamentally a decision technology, which means we are going to use AI, it's a prediction technology, to help us make all kinds of decisions with the algorithms that Ofer will talk about that have been trained with a lot of data. And based on all that, the AI will help us make wiser decisions. And you know, there are all kinds of disciplines that are very excited about AI. Healthcare, for example, that I've been very involved with some colleagues in the Linux Foundation trying to understand how we can apply AI in the world of healthcare. Well, an AI-based decision could be incredibly important, but remember, in healthcare, you're dealing with people's health. And so if somebody said, well, just trust the software, the answer is, what do you mean trust the software? I've been around long enough to know that software has bugs in it. In fact, with AI, we invented a new name for bugs. We call them hallucinations. Trust me, there is no difference between a bug and a hallucination. That's another way of describing a bug. So it's very important for the people working on the systems, testing the systems, making sure they work, that they can probe into the innards of the system. They can do whatever they need to do to make sure that it works well, that bad people hadn't added malicious code and things like that. And by having an open infrastructure on top of which you then build your proprietary applications, it makes it easier for the community to make sure that the infrastructure that we all build on is as good and reliable as possible.
Good. Well, we're here. Obviously, we are all big believer of open source and building AI in open fashion. But in realities, there are still a lot of closed source and proprietary AI systems out there. What are the potential risks? How does that contrast with open approaches? Can anybody want to comment on that?
Well, remember, and I have a lot of experience here, because in the early days when IBM embraced Linux, our commercial customers were saying, wait a second, I'm used to building proprietary applications, I make money from that, and now you want me to do that? And I said, no, you can build your proprietary applications on top of the open software components. So instead of having to spend your money redoing software that exists already because it's been built and tested by the community, put your money on the proprietary application that leverages the open source software. Brian, a very good example of this is what you are now doing as the CTO of the Open Wallet Foundation, where you do want the best possible wallets, but you don't need everybody to recreate all the components of a wallet from scratch. Maybe you can talk about that, because I find the work you're doing there so important, and it's so critical because identity is such an important part of a wallet. So maybe you can talk about what you're doing there just as an example.
Sure. Well, to some degree, the advantage of open source is in terms of being able to have lots of eyeballs looking at, the same lines of code, having shared engineering resources, pulling together to build something better than what individuals would create separately. I mean, that's kind of a hallmark of all open source projects. But in the domain of artificial intelligence, in the domain of verifiable credentials and payments, in some of these other areas, you're starting to see nation states wake up and realize that there's a certain degree of risk if they build applications or encourage their citizens to build applications on top of essentially black box technologies they don't have much visibility into, like how it comes up with its answers or how it works, that there's a certain degree of strategic risk to that. And this is risk for companies as well. If you're really building a business on top of, a service that's provided on the other side of an API, if that API the service behind that suddenly goes in a different direction. I remember there was an incident a couple of months ago where ChatGPT's answers to certain questions the rate of hallucinations shot skyward. No one really understood what was going on. They fixed it on the server side, but not before, that people, didn't have a sense of agency over that. Companies who were basing that, their businesses on top of that, what might have happened to the results that, they were channeling through to their customers, right? So this idea of having a stable ground, having something that is self-sovereign in a way, if you're deploying something as a nation state, building on top of a service by a company living in another state, always presents some strategic geopolitical risks. In the case of Open Wallet, we're actually seeing the European Union, the US government, the Japanese government, others starting to say not just here's the standards we want to use for things like mobile driver's licenses and digital diplomas and things like that, but also the container that you hold that in on your phone, on your desktop, even that should be independent. Even that should be something that's open source. That's where you can move these things between them. It should work more like email and more like the web than work the way that our messaging systems work today. WeChat versus Telegram versus WhatsApp. So they're actually putting resources into this, and many of those countries are also, and governmental organizations, also putting resources into national AI infrastructures, national grids, AI grids, and all of them want to use the same software because we've finally reached a point in the history of open source where governments realize not only is it okay to use, but it's actually okay and beneficial to put resources in to this commons to achieve certain strategic outcomes. And so that's what I'm really excited about happening on the AI space in particular. Can we find ways to use this mix of private sector investment, private sector talent, individual developers building what their intuition tells them is the right thing to build, but align that also with resources that might come from governments, the public sector, nonprofits, others, to try to build the kind of AI technologies we want to see.
Annie, if I may add something from my past, in the late 1990s, I was very involved with something called the President's IT Advisory Council. It was President Clinton's, and I was the co-chair of the council for about 2 years. And at one point, we did a report on the use of open source technologies in very critical systems like supercomputing. And the reason supercomputing is so critical, there are quite a number of, the Department of Energy uses it for very, very critical applications having to do with weapons and having to do with national security. So we held panels to discuss whether it was safe to use an open source system like Linux for these critical supercomputing applications, including members of the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and they all said, not only is it safe, we prefer it, because number one, that allows the government to collaborate with industry, and number two, that allows many more eyes to examine the code than would have been the case if it is proprietary. And Brian can say that recently there was an incident with Linux that was written about quite a bit in the press. And, a Linux maintainer found it and sort of became a hero of the community because he found it, because he noticed something didn't seem right. And then he went to his colleagues And people said he really protected very critical systems from being hurt by this bug. And that's definitely the case with AI.
Yeah, Irving, I think you're talking about the XZ vulnerability, the backdoor that looks like a nation state might have worked for quite a while to slip in to this tiny little library that one person was working on. This person we now think might have been compromised, and everybody was including it because it kind of did what it did. Now, this is both a cautionary tale, right? Open source has a lot of these small components written by just a few developers, but it's also a reassurance. You know, here is another person, actually a Microsoft researcher in their spare time, who noticed that SSHD was taking a half second longer, maybe even less, to accept a connection than otherwise, dug in and found this really bizarre thing that led to this discovery. So this is what I hope we can do with AI systems as well. We're all in a fight to try to make these systems more trustworthy, more reliable, to either counter hallucinations or channel them in the right way, right? To think about things like guardrails and ethics and the like. And we can't really get there unless we can see inside this black box. And we know, even if there's some pieces maintained just by one individual, which is almost inevitable, that there's always the ability for others to look over their shoulders and jump in and help and scrutinize, but also help build at the same time. And so that's what's really exciting and why it's really important to understand where and how these models that we'll be building these systems on top of are truly open.
Awesome. So I understand all of us, we are open source supporter, but I just want to play, devil's, well, I'm not saying these guys are devils, but I just want to, propose a question from the other side. Is there any, can you guys think of any instances that proprietary AI systems might be justifiable? And, how can their potential, how can they potentially navigate the negative impact? Is there any kind of use case that, a complete open system, AI system is just not possible? Can you guys think of any scenario?
Annie, I remember we are not against proprietary applications. We think there'll be lots of proprietary applications. We're talking about the underlying infrastructures supporting the applications being open, where the boundary is between open infrastructure and proprietary application. Brian, that changes with different projects, correct? There is no set boundary. That sort of is part of defining the architecture of the project. And, there is absolutely a lot of room for proprietary applications. Let me add an anecdote here that I find so important. When Linux first came out, there were two companies that were really dead set against it. One was Sun Microsystem, which is no longer with us. The second was Microsoft, which is one of the strongest supporters of the Linux Foundation. It's a platinum supporter. So, and they've done incredibly well in the marketplace. I think we can all agree on that. So I think there is nothing like watching what's going on in the marketplace and how more and more companies have said, okay, that's the path to go. I'll use the reusable components, the proprietary components, and then I'll build my proprietary, I'll use the open infrastructures and I'll build my proprietary applications on top of it. That seems right.
Annie, I also want to respond specifically to this kind of notion of, in addition to proprietary apps on top, is it ever justifiable to have non-open bits kind of scattered throughout the framework to the platform?
For AI, we're talking about AI only.
For AI in particular, absolutely. And I think here it's a little bit understandable if you take the point, realize that for a healthcare model, say, for looking at X-rays, right? The raw data for that, you can try to anonymize it all you want, but but sometimes there'll be just enough data that somebody can use to re-identify individuals, in that. For example, it might just be an image of an X-ray, but you probably have some phenotype information or demographic information as well. This is an individual, certain age, certain ethnicity in the geographic region, and as soon as you start getting to that, you run the risk of re-identifying that individual. And so I do think for categories like healthcare and finance and other highly regulated spaces, but also those that deal a lot with personal data, no amount of anonymization is going to provide the guarantees you might need. And you might have to deal with the fact that that underlying data set has to remain closed, but the model weights from it could be opened. Right. And I mean, again, thinking about other comparable things, this is kind of like the way we've accepted that, firmware to run inside of a chip is probably something we don't necessarily need to have open sourced in order to have the benefits of all the open source we build on top. Right. So I'll just leave it at that because I really do want us to get into understanding what is on the table here and what Ofer is going to talk about.
Yeah. That's a very good segue into what Ofer presentation. Generative AI Commons came up with MOF, Model Openness Framework, and the reason that we created that is because we understand that it's not black and white. You don't have to create everything AI system completely open or completely closed. There's a gray area as well. So in order to help the AI producers to have the opportunity to be totally transparent about how open they are, and for AI users to know exactly what they're getting, the Generative AI Commons community came up with this Model Openness Framework to help people navigate that. We call the opaqueness of openness in AI. So with that, Ofer, would you like to? You want me to share the screen? Would you like to go spend a few minutes talking about MOF?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I will start your presentation here. Just give me a second.
So basically, while you're doing that, basically we all know that there is a lot of confusion in the market. And basically, it's not clear what is open. There is no real definition of open source AI, and I will touch it a little bit later. And since this confusion, this unclarity in the market, we decided to build this model openness framework. And this is a sneak peek into something that will be officially announced in June. But we are happy to share it with the community now. Annie, you can go to the next slide. Basically, as I mentioned, a lot of confusion or open washing, as we call it, and we built this in order to create some clarity in this. You can move on. If we take a look at the different, Annie, you can please. Skip to the next slide. So if you, for example, take a look of existing open or proprietary licenses, you can see that there are many different options. On the open side, we have, of course, Apache and MIT for software, but we also need to take some other types of license for data and weights. And this is something that we identified. On the right side, you can see a few of the more popular models out there that call themselves open, but they are not really open because in many cases, they either don't even open the weights, or sometimes they use even a proprietary license for the model itself. And you can skip to the next slide. So as part of this effort, we identified 16 different elements that we need to take care of, or 16 different components that we need to take care of in order to define what is open. You can move to the next slide. We also defined for each component the different domain and the license, what is acceptable license. And then we basically defined 3 different classes of openness. And you can move to the next one, please. Thanks. So class 3, which we call open model, this is basically requires open model architecture and model parameters and metadata on top of some other items. The next class, next one please, is the open tooling. And on top of everything that we have, that we require on class 3, we also require open training code, open inference code, and evaluation code and data. And the highest level of openness, which we call open science, requires everything to be open, including research, including the data sets, and everything associated with the model. And basically, the idea is that each open model in the market will use this framework in order to define what is the class that they are associated with. If we take some examples, as I mentioned earlier, Llama 2 or 3, for example, they are not really open source because, for example, the Llama is using proprietary license, which is not OSI approved license. Gemma, for example, the model that Google open sourced, is the model itself is open, but the weights are behind user agreement, which is not really clear what you can do with it. Some other models out there that are that can be classified into this MOF are Phi for Microsoft, which is class 3, Mistral, which is also class 3, and we did identify two models out there that can be classified as class 1 open science, and these are almost published by Allen Institute for AI last week. They announced it at Open Source in North America in Seattle, and LLM 360, which is also probably a class 1. And you can move on. We identified the benefits for the producers. You can see it here. We don't have a lot of time, so I will skip it. And the benefits for the consumer, basically to reduce the confusion and to allow clarity to the users. So if you're a consumer of Llama 2 or Llama 3 now, maybe you can't really do everything that you want. You cannot rely on the model to stay completely open because it's not. Let's maybe discuss for a minute how we take this initiative, the MOF initiative, and compare it to the open source AI initiative. Maybe Annie, can you jump back to slide 4, the components? So basically, as part of our activities, I am personally part of the OSI initiative to define open source AI, which is something that is not yet defined. So if someone says, this is an open source AI, okay, it's your definition because OSI didn't yet decide on that. So there is an effort running at OSI, and we are about to publish something that stable release of the definition. And in October, we will define the final results. But in any case, in order to define what is open source AI, the OSI team took this list of elements and basically analyzed them across the different domains and decided what in this list should be open and what can stay non-open. So if I can predict what will be the outcome will not be that open source AI must be level 1, what we defined as level 1. Open science, it will be probably something between open model and open tooling. Probably around open tooling. And maybe to conclude this sneak peek to the MOF, I would like to invite you to take a look at these different QR codes. So on the top left, we have the Generative AI Commons, where we publish everything that we do. On the right side, this is the MOF tool, and this is a tool that will allow model developers to basically test their model against the definition of the different levels. And basically, this will allow everyone that wants to contribute a model into the MOF framework to identify the level of openness. On the bottom left, we have the MOF page with all the links and all the elements. And on the right side, on the bottom right side, we have a white paper published in a Google Doc version, where we ask the community to provide feedback. So if you are interested to read more about the MOF and to provide feedback before we officially announce the MOF, please scan the QR code on the bottom right and provide your feedback.
Great, thank you. So what's Ofer, so what's next for MOF? So obviously we're getting feedback, and so what's next?
So basically next is to publish the MOF tool, basically to build a tool that will allow the contributors to evaluate their models. And we really hope that this framework will become the de facto standard for openness in AI.
And we will only accept OSI licenses. And this is how we work with OSI. Okay, great. Well, that leaves us about 10 minutes for Q&A. And I see we have quite a few questions from we have questions from the audience. Please write your questions on the chat, Q&A chat, and we will answer them. Okay, so before we get questions, here I see I got a few questions here. So number one, what ethical considerations should be prioritized when advocating for openness in AI development? And how can these considerations be integrated into practice? Anybody wants to chat?
I'll throw in a bit. So it's funny. One of the first data sets that was used to kind of prove out generative AI principles was the data set of emails from the Enron lawsuits, because they were free of copyright issues. They were public domain. But you could expect that the language in those emails was probably pretty full of toxicity towards all sorts of different people, lots of corporate speak, lots of false confidence, right? The second, another major data set, much larger, that was used later was the corpus of all comments left on Reddit. And I like Reddit, parts of Reddit, but if you take it as a whole, it's probably also full of a rather high degree of toxic content. And so it shouldn't surprise us if we build these data sets out of all the data out there, equally weighted, all the text content, that they end up being somewhat a reflection of their inputs. We've seen a lot of folks refine that by trying to pick better data sets and be choosier, better annotations, that sort of thing. But between that and being smart about the RHLF training and other types of additional feedback that you can put in and inputs, you can end up with models that are at least softer and better when it comes to their outputs, right? Perhaps you can even train them on the same kind of content that we think of training, college graduates on, or majors in certain degrees. If we want an expert in chemistry, at a college level chemistry, let's send them the textbooks of college chemistry texts, right? So that's one way. A second way is, we know that a lot of people do post-output filtering on the outputs of these. And so what I think we could do as a service is, as we publish these models, also having a data set of, here's some interesting output filters to consider, or other kind of fine-tuned data sets specifically used to train the kind of models that would filter for those kinds of outputs. I don't think it's really possible to have a model that could never say something unethical or could never, be escaped to try to give you instructions on how to build a nuclear bomb or something like that, right? So there are certain limits to what we as tools makers can do. And certainly once you have the source code, you can, make it do anything you want if you're in the control of the deployment of it, right? But I think there's defaults we can build in and ways that we can work together on guardrails and better data sets and other things like that. But I think a lot of that is still to be determined.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, next question is kind of relevant here. In what ways can openness in AI development help address biases and promote fairness, equity, and inclusivity in AI systems?
So maybe I'll try to answer this one. So what is the bias? What is fair in general? I would argue that different societies, different cultures define it in a different way. So basically, having the opportunity or the option to take a model and to fine-tune it into your culture, into your norms, provides a lot of value. Because currently, most of the models out there are coming from one area of the world. Most of them. There are some others, but like the big mass of AIs here in the US. And I think that this will allow, open source will allow everyone to take it and fine tune it, add more languages, add more cultures, and more different things that define their societies.
Okay, while you're here, Ofer, there's a question could be in your area. Are you standardizing a labeling or auditing process for Gen AI back of milk container type of accessible label? So I think it's more about MOF because we have 3 classes. And what Leslie is asking is, are we labeling or are we going to do any kind of auditing and that kind of stuff?
So basically, the current approach is to do it. It's a self-evaluation. So we provide the tools, we provide the guidelines, but you self-evaluate your model based on the tools and guidelines that we provide. And then we will have like a badging system. So you evaluate and we give you a badge according to the level of openness or the class of openness that you belong to.
And Ofer, I think the self-labeling thing is actually normative. I mean, like when you put an open source license in your license.md at the top of your GitHub repo, that is normative. That's you as the author saying this is the license that this package is under, right? Likewise, I think we hope that the mof.json, distributed with the model or components of the model, will be normative as well. It'll be a declaration by the developers of the model. And hopefully that means in the future, the far future, when you're browsing models on Hugging Face or on AWS or on any of the places where models get hosted, as you pick them up, you'll be able to prefer the ones that have the tier, the class of openness that you need for your application or for your risk management.
Exactly.
Yep. Sounds good. Okay, next, we have time for a couple more questions. Any questions from the audience? Here. What mechanisms can be put in place to ensure that open AI systems are secure and resilient against malicious exploitation or misuse? Anybody wants to take a stab at that?
Maybe Irving, you already mentioned that earlier, like it's exposed. Everyone can see that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Look, here is my feeling that, and we are in a whole new era of computing. If I look at, let's say, the first 50 years of computing, it was software centric. Since, I don't know, I started computing when I entered college in 62 or the summer before that. And then that continued for 50 years. And we learned a lot about how to write programs and so on. AI is a different thing because it's data-centric computing. Like, we are training the models with data, and as Ofer just went through, the data is sort of, it's both part of the model and it's not. It's one of the components. And I think that as a result of that, it's going to take us a while to learn how to feel comfortable with data-centric computing. For example, Brian mentioned that for lots of applications in healthcare, finance, etc., we want to be very sensitive to the data. And now, can you train a model with sensitive data, but then not have the data be part of the model so you can use the model? Brian, I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. But I guess what I'm saying is we are in the early stages of AI, let alone in the early stages of Gen AI. Gen AI, I don't know, let's say if it's 3 years old, that's a toddler at 3 years old. And that's why the most important aspect of the open source is collaboration. You know, rather than having individual companies say, let me do this, let me do that, please come together and work together to do the right thing. And you cannot come together and work together if everything is proprietary. That's sort of my view here. Brian, what do you think, since you've been around open source so long?
Well, I think the question is on a lot of people's minds. You know, if it's open source software, what can you do to guarantee that it's not used in a way that causes harm? The frank and honest answer is you can't. You know, open source software long before AI is used in all sorts of industries, industries that perhaps the developers wish that they weren't, right? Or used in ways that they wish that they couldn't be. When they've been used to create malware or attacks or systems that create attack, we've come up with defenses for that. When they've been used to send spam, we've come up with anti-spam tools, right? I have high conviction that these same tools, to the degree that they can be misused, can also be used for improved defense.
Yeah.
And so that's really why I think that they need to be open, because we need to enable the good people, the good actors, to do good things with them. And I think that will end up outweighing the bad actors doing the bad things and help contain the potential for harms and risks.
I mean,
Awesome.
what I find so appealing about the Linux Foundation is that it's brought together hundreds of companies and thousands and thousands of people all working together for the common good. And you know, history shows that's the only way to learn how to do things better.
I like that. With that note, we're at time. Thank you so much, panelists. It was a great, awesome, and it's an honor to be on this panel with you. Thank you. And somebody just said good discussion. So the good news is this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube and various channels, social channels, as well as Generative AI Commons website. And we would like to do this as often as possible, but at the very minimum, we're going to do it once a quarter. And anybody interested in any topic, please join Generative AI Commons and yeah. That's work together in an open way and build a responsible AI in an open fashion. Thank you so much, everyone. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.